to the Shock Absorber podcast. I am not Joel. My name is Tim, and I'm here with two other co-hosts because Joel's away this week. We've got our regular Stu. How you going today?
Hello, and I'm also not Joel.
You're also not Joel. And third, not Joel.
Yeah, also not Joel.
Also not Joel is Ethan.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's lots of fun.
It's great.
Joel's having a week off, so we thought we'd run right with the podcast.
That's
and
it.
See how we go. Including for those who are watching on YouTube, you'll notice a new addition to the studio. Ethan, this was your design. What are you doing with the set here?
We've bought a little table. We've added a little screen.
Yep.
Whether we use the screen or not, we'll see. That'll be you on YouTube will be able to see that,
Yep.
which will be exciting. But yeah, just trying to add a little jazz.
Oh, excellent. Well, rate and comment down below so we know what you think about the new set design.
Let us know.
Let us know in the comments below. Is that what they say?
That's it.
Yeah, excellent. All right, I'm super online.
Doing a great job.
Well, we've got a few things to talk about. I want to get to the topic of frivolity and joy.
Yes.
Soul Revival had a viral moment.
We did.
A few weeks back, but it's a bit of a tease. We'll get to that very soon. But the man who went viral before viral was a thing had a state funeral in this last week. So John Laws, the golden voice of Australian radio.
Golden tonsils.
Golden tonsils, yeah. And we
Was
realised...
that actually said about him?
I don't know.
Oh, but the golden voice thing was said.
Golden voice was said, yeah.
I don't know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me.
We mentioned this earlier. We realised that, I'm not of a generation that listened to John Laws, but I knew who he was as an Australian celebrity. But Ethan, you had never heard of this man.
At all.
Okay.
Never.
How things change.
I'm keen to be educated though.
He was
That's what
probably
we're
the
doing
biggest
on this
media
podcast.
personality in Australia for 5 decades.
Yeah, maybe I should know him.
No, not necessarily.
Just
the world's changed.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
a radio guy, talkback.
Yeah, Talkback Radio.
He could help decide elections.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Wow.
So when prime ministers and leaders of the opposition would go and talk to him.
Yeah.
There's a couple other dudes like that too, but he was pretty big.
Was it Alan Jones?
Alan Jones was.
I know that name.
Yeah, so Alan Jones, John Laws were kind of the friendly rivals in the radio space.
Yeah, sure.
So similar in the way that they talk about how all the podcasts that Trump went on had such a massive influence in garnering particular cohorts and voices and votes.
That would happen, but for the
Alan Jones and John Laws could make or break a prime minister.
Yeah, wow. That's wild.
Yeah, so massive influence. But he died very recently. He had a state funeral at St Andrew's Cathedral in Sydney during this week of recording. What I thought was interesting, though, was the Reverend Dr. Michael Jensen, one of the Anglican ministers in Sydney, gave the sermon at the funeral, which is a state funeral. There were a whole lot of dignitaries there. There was media personalities. There were, John Williamson, massively famous Australian singer, was there. Russell Crowe, the actor, gave a eulogy. There would have been, politicians and everyone there. So very much a public event, very much a state event. And his sermon was an absolute cracker. It was about 6-7 minutes long. There's a meme for you. But just tied together who John Laws was, referenced the Gospel of John, and talked about the other John.
Awesome.
Talked about John Laws was this voice that we all heard and listened to.
That's
and
clever.
the voice of God in the incarnation of Jesus. So all these really, Michael Jensen is a very clever rhetorician. Is that a word?
I like that word.
Is now.
Yeah, his word now. He's very good author, speaker, writer. So it's no surprise that he was able to pull off something really amazing.
Yeah, he's very clever, man.
What I was reflecting on was it would be a very difficult situation being a very non-Christian kind of environment.
Yes.
Where most of the audience are not there to hear the Christian gospel, not here to hear a sermon. I had something similar recently. I was conducting a funeral. Sorry, not a funeral. I was going to a wedding.
Slightly different.
Very different. I was
different stage of life, maybe.
Yeah. For a couple who is newish to our church and have... So there were no other Christians there that I was aware of. So not Christian friendship groups. And so just a very... Not there to celebrate Jesus, not there to celebrate a Jesus-centered wedding. Yeah. And so I was trying to write the sermon. I mean, I did the prayer book service. So that's all scripted for you. So that's easy to talk about the gospel through the prayer book.
Yep.
But then there's, again, there's the 8-10 minutes where you want to read a passage of scripture and give a sermon. And just trying to put that together in a way that made sense to people who were not Christians. Anyway, it made me think, it'd be really fun to just start. What's one of the maybe the most challenging environments or one of the hardest talks, sermons, preaching that you've had to do in your time? Ethan, you got anything in mind?
I had a scripture class quite a while ago now where I was trying to present the gospel to a whole bunch of teenagers, and the amount of care that those teenagers had equated to wanting to get out of maths, and scripture was the better option.
Right.
And so you could really feel that as the vibe in the class. And so you're attempting to, I don't know if you've ever thought of preaching or speaking like this, but you're kind of riding a wave of interaction, particularly in a scripture class, like where there's actually give and get out of the interactions. But it was just a lot of me talking blank, or me talking to each other instead of any, like it was this guy's not here for anything that we care about. And so trying to preach the gospel into that was wild.
It's a little bit like that at the wedding. There's just you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was very respectful and silent, but you could just the screensavers were up ready for, has the church been over yet?
Yeah.
Can we get to the party now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a lot like that. It was either screensavers or I'm on my phone or I'm throwing things at each other at the back of the class. Yeah.
Stu, you've got heaps of preaching experience. Can you think of a particularly tricky environment where you've had to do a talk?
Yes. I rocked up to school one day and I was going to speak to young people out in the playground. The school had just given permission for us to start a ministry, and on the first week, a kid threw an orange and hit me in the head, and so that wasn't a great start. And was really lovely though, because eventually that kid did come along to listen to the talk, not that day, but did come eventually, and he actually became a Christian and came to Soul Revival for a time.
Oh, amazing.
So that was really exciting. But yeah, it was a bit of a hard start to get hit in the head with an orange.
Yeah. And this is probably going to be a little bit deeper than I intended for this section, but what are you thinking of when you're thinking of like being responsive to that? How do you respond to the orange being thrown at your head in such a way that kid feels like he can still come back in later and have a conversation? What's the posture, I suppose, that you?
It's a really good question. I think it starts with a confidence in the fact that I didn't do anything to deserve the orange. It was somebody else's judgment of me, and I don't know what's going on for that person. So something's going on for them to do something like that and respond. It was good that I knew that I had the school's permission and I had church's permission and I had the diocese position, and so I was doing nothing out of the ordinary. So it wasn't that I was doing anything that strange to go up to school and do a lunchtime group. I think the posture of grace helped me a lot, just to forgive straight away and just say it doesn't matter. I took a Panadol later that day because it was still had a headache, but I think it's grace.
Are hard.
Yeah, that one was pretty hard. And there was a lot of laughter and it was embarrassing and awkward. But you just, I don't know, you just think it's part of the job.
Yeah. I think that grace part. As I think about that kid who then at some point later is actually going to feel like he can sidle up and listen and then take seriously and then investigate Jesus and then become a Christian. Like there's a long trajectory from throwing an orange to becoming a Christian and being part of the church. But the attitude of the...
Yeah, he was watching to see what I do, I think, too. And the fact that I responded the way I did, I think he didn't expect it. So I think that caused him to be curious. What's going on here that this person wouldn't... Like normally there'd be some exclamation of frustration or upset or leave or whatever it is, but I didn't do any of that.
Yep.
And I was just whatever. I didn't even really flinch.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got an orange hit me in the head,
Yep.
but it's not going to stop me doing what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
So that was how I felt.
No, that's cool. We've talked a couple of times over the last few episodes that we've been preaching through 1 Peter, and there's that line about living such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may praise God in heaven. And there's an example of you reacted in a way that was Christ oriented.
Absolutely.
I don't always do that well, but
that
day
in this
was
particular
all right.
situation.
Yeah.
And that instead of, I mean, sometimes Peter is anticipating that it'll bring hostility when we live Christ-centered ways, but sometimes that verse suggests that sometimes it'll breed curiosity. People go, oh, that's interesting.
Good point.
What's going on there? And so they'll come and then ask questions.
I hadn't connected it to that. I think that's a good point. Because there also is, Peter says, don't repay insult with insult.
Yep.
So I think it takes a lot of Christian years to get to that point, I think. Like when I was younger, I was fairly young. I was 25 or something. But yeah, when I was a younger teenager, I wouldn't have had that response.
Yeah.
I think I would have got all mardy, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking about oranges,
Yes.
the other thing I'd like to talk about is church kitchens. So there was an article
Good segue.
Great
Yeah,
segue.
you like that segue?
Nailed it. Joel, you don't need to come back.
No. Please come back, Joel.
No, Joel, we do. We miss you. We miss you.
But there was an interesting article in Christianity Today this week about church kitchens are getting chopped. So this is how it starts. Church kitchens are disappearing. They're disappearing from rural, suburban and urban churches, liberal and conservative churches, contemporary and liturgical, mega churches and medium-sized. One by one across America, as buildings are remodeled and new construction replaces old, kitchens are getting scrapped. So newly built or remodeled churches typically have a space with a sink and a coffee pot, possibly a microwave, but no expanse of countertop suitable for chopping carrots, potatoes and onions to go into a big pot of soup. Churches these days don't have a lot of cupboards and drawers labelled forks and knives, spoons and serving utensils. That kind of space is gone, or at least is going away. Hospitality, we've talked about this before. People can go back in the archive and find the 3 episodes we did on the theology, strategy and practice of hospitality. But this struck me as really interesting and curious because it is so different to the way that we think about how important meals are. Now, Ethan, you went on the podcast for those ones. What's your experience and reflections on the way that Soul Revival does meals as part of church?
Yeah, so I'm in my second year at Moore College now, which means I've been on 2 college missions. And those have been like, I didn't realize that I would feel weird about going to church and not eating until I went to churches and didn't eat.
Are you really hungry?
I was starving. I was like, what are we doing? Like, we're going home. What's happening? And I was really, one of the 2 churches I went to at one of the services did a meal. And I was like, yes, this is great. But because I don't have to go home and get Macca's on the way. But genuinely, like I didn't realize that it was odd. And different because I have just been in this for so long, and I reflected on as I went to those churches and experienced that. I was like, oh, why is it really important? And one of the reasons it's important is because we spend more time together, and time together is always an amazing thing for relationships. One of the churches I went to, all the young people after church went to the pub and hung out, had a meal, played pool. Like it was all fine. But it was a group of young people wanting to keep hanging out and only being able to do it in this secular space, which has its benefits. Like I think you can be really helpful, but it also, and I could see, had its negatives too. In that immediately there's alcohol, and there's one of the young people brought his brother who was 12, who was seeing that was how Christians hang out. And I was just like, oh, that's a real shame that this is the only expression of being able to spend more time together relationally was at the pub with a beer, which by having meals at church completely gets rid of, in that we get all of those benefits, but we don't have to leave to do it, and we don't have to separate to do it as well. Like at one of the beautiful things we have at Soli's is that I will have dinner with someone that I am not like at all. In age or stage or gender or whatever. Whereas the group that went to the pub were all mates that were all mostly in the same stage, and the brother was just a tag along, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, we have an intentional time to just sit and eat food together and spend that time piece.
Yep.
So there's a few things there, but that was something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. The piece goes on to explain kind of a Western suburban history of where churches got kitchens from. Talk about how, the early church didn't necessarily have kitchens. And you think about churches from the cathedrals don't necessarily have kitchens in them. And they talk about the rise of that. But I think it's an important part of the Soul Revival story is that we didn't get the idea of meals from a suburban Western context. You've told this story before, Stu, but it'd be good just for those who have dropped in for the first time, the Indigenous connection that we've got in why we do meals. You want to just tell that story again?
Yeah, so it does go back a little bit before that as well, because when we started Soul Revival, we did it on a Saturday night. And what we decided Soul Revival was as an expression originally was a group of friends hanging out with each other. So it wasn't an actual church service. It was just a group of mates hanging out, inviting non-Christians to come, inviting younger Christians to come. And what made our friendship group a bit different was we hung out around the Word of God. So most friendship groups wouldn't get together and have a read on a Saturday night and then have a talk about the Bible and have a pray. But that's what we used to do. And also because we were hanging out, which was a social activity, we wanted to have a meal together. So we were eating on Saturday nights from an early stage. So that was the origins of it. But it wasn't, let's start a ministry of hospitality or let's start a dinner for some reason. It was more like we're hanging out and we like to eat. So that took the form of takeaway pizzas to start off with, and then it ended up getting a bit more when we got a fire bin. We got a fire bin to hang out around because we were just hanging out in someone's garage in their backyard. And so we got sick of pizza every week, and then we started cooking pasta for some reason. We had these massive pots of pasta and a bit of mince, and we just enjoyed making our own dinners as well. So then we go out sometimes and sometimes be in. But later, during that time, we'd hang out on Saturday night as Soulies, but then on Sunday night we'd go to church, and there was no dinners on Sunday night. Church was just go to church, maybe hang around and talk for 15 minutes and then go do whatever you're going to do next. And so we didn't think of connecting that dinner to church. We just were doing it together as it was always a Soul Revival practice, but Soul Revival wasn't church, right? So in 1999, around 2000, we asked our minister if we could make Saturday night a church service, and he said, I don't want that. And we're cool with that. Menai at the same time, Menai Anglican Church, we were friends with them. They were part of a thing called the Treehouse with us, and their senior youth minister, Chris, asked their minister at the same time as I asked our minister, and Menai did have the permission to do a church service. But interestingly, they didn't do a meal after the service or before it. They all went out and just everyone would go out and do whatever they wanted to socially. So I think that was the difference between us and Menai. They applied the Soulies friendship idea differently. We were more holistic and had more different groups of people. So then we met our Aboriginal friends Isaac and Eileen. They were from Brewarrina. And when I went out to Brewarrina, I really enjoyed going to church with them, which lasted a lot longer than we go to church. Like, it wasn't just an hour, it was a lot longer than that. But also at the end of the service, we had dinner together. And I'm like, this is great. I love this. So then fast forward 10 years when we get an opportunity to be called by the bishop to start a church. And we thought, well, we've already been doing these Soulies hangouts where we have dinner. We love hanging out on Saturday night. So let's do the church service on Saturday night. And the Aboriginal friends that we've got have shown us how to connect a dinner to a service. So instead of following an American model or an English model of how to do a new church plant, there was lots of those expressions around the world that Australians were copying, or even copying other Australian expressions. We thought we'd copy an Aboriginal expression of church. And so our service went for a bit longer, and the meals were a big part of what we did. So it came out of relationship. And I think when I listen to people saying they want to start them, I often ask myself in my mind, are you doing this because you love each other and you love Jesus and you want to hang out together? Or are you doing this because you're hoping it will be some kind of tool that you can use to develop discipleship or relationship at church? And I think it actually works really well when the senior pastor actually just wants to hang out with people at church and will have dinner by himself if no one else wants to come. So if 2 or 3 people come to dinner, that's just as successful as 20 or 30. In our mindset, we've got this funny idea that, even though if we've got 8 friends coming over for dinner, that would be a wonderful time. But we've got this funny dynamic that if only 8 people come for dinner after church, that somehow it's not working.
Yeah.
And that's sucking the joy out of it. So I think to do dinners properly, not that you do it properly, but to have a good outcome is joy. So I know you're going to get to that in a sec, but you really enjoy hanging out and just eating with whoever wants to hang around.
Yeah, and that's helpful because there was a bit towards the end of the article that didn't quite sit with me, and I couldn't work out why. And I think you just talking has just helped me think it through. The strategy has this big friendship piece to it, because they talk towards the end of the article. They talk about some how kitchens are disappearing. They talk about some churches where they actually are building kitchens and why they're doing that. But one of the things right towards the end, the author writes, other congregations have decided a big kitchen requires too much work, doesn't serve their needs, or won't help them serve their communities. A big fellowship hall, if it's not in use, it just leaves the church feeling kind of empty. A big kitchen can be limiting. Churches are living organisms. The architecture needs to be living too. Churches adapt. Architects who specialise in sacred spaces told Christianity Today that adaptation might lead to more childcare co-ops or co-working spaces in American churches. In the past, church needs were met in the kitchen, but now people seem hungry for something else, which is a very clever last line. But I couldn't work out why there was a disconnect in my mind between that and what you were just saying. But I think the difference now, as I'm hearing you speak, is their strategy is what is going to help us do outward-facing ministry to serve the community, and that's it. And is the kitchen a space we can serve our community? Does our community want that? Or if not, well, let's scrap it and find a co-working space, or let's find a childcare. What is going to serve our community? So that's got much more of that sort of missional. How do we use our church facilities for mission out in our community? So not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that it becomes a particular strategy piece in that theology strategy practice. Whereas if you're talking, the strategy is, no, what do friends do when they gather together? They eat. We have 100 friends. What are 100 friends going to do? They're going to eat. Well, you need a certain size for that. So that subtle shift in strategy, I think has kind of made a connection for me of why that last little bit wasn't quite working. I couldn't quite work out why I was niggling at my mind, but I think that might be it. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a hangover of the incarnational approach. So I think that the incarnational approach is people aren't going. Well, let me say it quickly. I don't want to create a straw man or whatever.
No, sure.
Straw person. But there is a logic that says, okay, how do we reach out to the community and how do we bless the community?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's have something that's halfway between the church and the world, so to speak. So and that's where a lot of third place theory is used in a lot of churches incarnationally, which is, well, if people aren't going to come to our church community and they find our culture foreign, let's do something that's not Christian in between that they can come and be a part of, and then go, oh, Christians don't have 2 heads. I might come to church.
So just like an example of that from there, they talked about churches basically using their kitchens as like community halls.
Yes.
Yeah, people will do have your birthday party here, or have your funeral wake here, or these kinds of things. Yeah. So go on.
So that's a funnel method.
Yep.
So a funnel method in Australian context, Brass Tacks designed that funnel method for youth ministry. Youth group Friday night, funnels kids into Bible study, funnels them into church. Didn't really work very well in the 80s when I was growing up. But a book called No Guts, No Glory came out by Al Stewart and Ken Moser and Ed Vaughan, which said, why don't you scrap the funnel and just be Christian? And their approach was just do a Bible study. We had a similar approach in the 90s, but a bit different, more relational. We still had social hangout, but it wasn't as a place in between church and the world. So we had a similar ethos to No Guts, No Glory, which was let's make the Bible the centre of our community. And Soul Revival's take on it was, why do we go to church and do all our faith stuff in the institutional form of a service, and then when we have an opportunity to hang out informally as Christians, we don't carry over any of that culture into our daily lives? So instead of starting a third place that was in between the world and the church, I think we went back to what used to happen before the 1960s. Now, in churches that have kitchens, often you'll find really old cutlery, really old cups and plates that are from a bygone era, because that's the era where everyone went, let's get them. The question I had was, why is all this old stuff here and we don't have any modern stuff? Because when I was even growing up in the 80s, our kitchen was being neglected because we weren't using it very often. I'm like, why do we have a kitchen? What's the point of that? And I thought, yeah, we use it from time to time. But talking to some of the elders, I found out that actually part of their regular rhythm as a faith community was to have what was called fellowship teas.
Yep.
Now, the fellowship tea was the chance for the whole group to spend time together and have a meal. So they would cook in the kitchen and they would cook a meal together. So actually doing meals and offering hospitality in churches is not some cool new way of being incarnational and helping people come across. It's actually a way of being Christian, where the whole community is actually not only relating to each other symbolically in the service, but and we do, it's more than just symbolic, but there's a lot of symbolic relating in the church service. We're also practically learning how to live that out over a fellowship tea. And so my version of that was I would, after church, be invited to the fellowship tea. Sometimes it was on a different day and we'd all get together, but mostly on a Sunday, and we'd go to the fellowship tea. Where it came from was people used to go to church twice on a Sunday, and they didn't go to work, they had no sport, and they didn't have anything else to do. Prioritised going to morning song and then evensong. And in the middle, they had lunch quite regularly because they were there all day, actually. So they'd slowed down, they had a Sabbath, they were with the people of God in the community of God's people, and they gathered around the Word of God, and then they had a meal together. And I remember the cut sandwiches at those fellowship teas and the little party pies. It was all very simple.
Yep.
But it was all very 70s and very simple food, but it was just delightful. And to score a little chicken sandwich with a bit of lettuce before everyone got to them. But on the other side, I hated the eggs. They used to make egg sandwiches. They were awful.
I love egg
sandwiches.
So
I
love egg sandwiches so much.
I was kind of taught that you don't always get the kind of food you want.
Yes, right, of course.
Yeah. Food's not about my individual choice. These days, I can get Uber for Ethan and Lou and me and Elijah and Katie. We could all get different meals from different restaurants and all sit down around the table and eat it together. So we were taught to...
And didn't make any of it together.
That's right.
It wasn't the process of building.
We're taught to slow down and just spend more time. Somewhere along the lines, we've exported out discipleship and mission from the church service. Pre-industrial churches were places where people came for discipleship and mission. Most mission would have been... not that everyone was a Christian as an adult in the church, but a lot of it was passing on the gospel to the next generation. And I think that pre-industrial format lasted until the 1950s, 60s, maybe into the 70s. But somewhere along the lines, the fellowship tea was lost. Fellowship is friendship. We are going to express friendship and relationship with each other and be friends and hang out. Not because we have anything in common outside of what we are as Christians. But what we've done in the modern church since the church growth movement is we've said, particularly with extreme versions like Willow Creek, let's run a seeker service on Sunday, which is for evangelism, for mission, admittedly, but let's do the discipleship separate to evangelism. So there's this logic that you don't do discipleship and mission together. So somewhere along the line we thought they're two separate things. And in fact, the youth course in AYD and then into YouthWorks, I don't know if it's still called this, but there were two separate subjects in the youth course when I was part of helping to teach part of it, which was youth in churches and mission to youth. They were two separate courses. And I used to think, why are they two separate courses? Why can't you do youth and mission and discipleship at the same time? But the reason people didn't like to come to Soli's on a Saturday night was they're saying, oh, you're just a holy huddle, because they thought to themselves, you're just discipling each other. But the fellowship teas were great because I came as a bit of a outsider, as a child back in those days, you weren't part of the formal, full-on adult congregation of the core of the church, but you came along and you were introduced to the church. You could say it was a preparatory approach, but it was still, as an outsider, it was helping me to understand what the social dynamics of the church were. It helped me to see who was powerful, who wasn't, who was people listening to. How do you deal with someone who's got, just a bit out there? And I learned a lot of stuff through that, how to be a Christian. And then when we stopped doing it, it was because I think practically people are like, it's too big a deal and no one wants to hang around because everyone's too busy. So we capitulated to that. And so then what I think's happened also since the 60s is we've started Bible studies, and that definitely is saying, go to church on Sunday, but for your discipleship, go to Bible study. Yep. It's a similar thing to the Willow Creek where you do your seeker service on the weekend and then you do that. But the problem in the Anglican Church, the Archbishop Peter Jensen recognised in between 2008 and 10, I can't remember now, but he said, I don't think we've been thinking enough about mission. Mm-hmm. We think that we are opening our doors and everyone will just come in, but they're not. And I think we have to start thinking about mission again. That's what he said to us. And I thought that was interesting because a lot of people then thought, well, we've got to do mission and discipleship separately. So now let's export mission out of the church as well and do events, which is what we did in the 70s. We exported our real mission to the men's night where you have a guest speaker from the Sharks and you come along and you sign up and say, yes, I want to become a Christian, or you have a women's speaker, or you have a youth group. And then I think we turn around and wonder why people don't come to church anymore because we're not actually actively thinking this is where the discipleship happens and this is where the mission happens. So what are we there for? What are we doing? It's just the event. You go along because that's what you do as a Christian. Sure, there's elements for different faith communities like Pentecostal communities. That is a really important part of discipleship and growing and sanctification by singing. That's a really crucial part.
Sort of the worship component, the musical part.
Yeah, that's right. And for traditional Anglicans, the sacraments are incredibly important, and the prayer book and the table and all that. But then for a lot of Christians, it's like, I don't really like singing. A lot of guys don't like singing and they don't really get into the tradition. So they're like, I feel like I've got to go because it's the right thing to do. Yep. But I think what we've tried to do with Soul Revival is say, let's bring back the fellowship tea and we'll modernise it by just saying we're having a meal, offering hospitality, and we're going to do it in the context of the service. So we want to say, let's do mission and discipleship at the same time again. And I remember saying to Lou when we started Soulies, do you think we're going to have to start like Bible studies to funnel people into church? She said, let's just be confident enough to invite people back to church again, particularly as people don't know what it is anymore. And it's working for us in our context. It might not work everywhere, but we're just going back to basics. Hey, do you want to come to church on Sunday? And not trying to say, come to this middle section because it'll be kind of hostile to you. A lot of young people going, actually, thanks for asking me. I've often wondered what happens in a church. Yeah, I'll come along and check it out. And we've got a meal afterwards. You can stay for a meal if you want to, or go if you want to. Okay. Funnily enough, a lot of people don't stay for the meal. They don't come for the meal first and then go to church. So we're not using the meal as an incarnational device. We're using it first as a discipleship function, which also is missional as well at the same time. Yeah. So I think getting away from that incarnational thing, Andrew Root wrote in 2008 in Revisiting Relational Youth Ministry that the incarnational approach of the late 20th century was a little bit manipulative, and it was a bit of what I call bait and switch. The Jim Rayburn incarnationalism from the 1950s that set up all of this culture was, we've got to be cool. We've got to earn the right to be heard by people before we can preach the gospel. But I think the meal done as let's be inviting people to see what Christians live like, that's sadly new. People aren't thinking like that.
Yeah. And it fits a particular cultural moment where we are at the moment as well, where you've got the younger generations who are not rejecting Christianity like a lot of the millennials have. They sort of often grew up in church and rejected church, whereas the alphas have no experience. So inviting them to, hey, would you like to check out church and see what a Christian is like? They're like, yeah, actually, that's kind of cute. Kind of the way that the Christian, if you had a really good Buddhist friend who said, hey, why don't you come to the temple with me and just kind of see what we do? You're like, I'm curious, yeah. So it's that kind of, because we're not, the younger generation particularly is not rejecting a notion of Christianity. That kind of just, hey, let's just invite to church does seem to work particularly well for them.
Do you know what's interesting? I've tracked a little bit of a pathway. The hippies left the church, the baby boomers, particularly those of them that were hippies, left the church, were very critical of their parents' generation for being too materialistic. So they dropped out and they had, all these communes, and they said, pro this and pro that and anti this and anti that. And then in the 80s, there was a sense from my generation that a lot of the hippies sold out. So these people who were sitting around in communes in the late 60s were now driving BMWs to their high-paying jobs in the city. And so a lot of exes were very cynical about this whole hippie thing, which kind of died in the 80s and 90s. But what happened was, because a lot of the parents, a lot of the hippies in the 70s didn't bring their kids up to be Christians, there was a moment in the 90s where a whole heap of teenagers didn't know anything about church. And so I had that awesome opportunity to walk into a room and teach scripture, and people were like, I've never heard of Adam and Eve. Who are they?
Yeah.
Why are you into that? I was even as a tutor at university, and I'm teaching communism to a bunch of political science students, and they're like, do you what do you think? And I'm like, I'm just a Christian. That's kind of my worldview. And then they're like asking me for coffee afterwards to find out what is that? Like, why are you into that? That's different, unusual. But then in the 2000s, new atheism came along and made everybody angry. So what I think happened was the non-Christian kids of the Gen Xers actually end up making their kids cranky again, like the baby boomers did. Yep. And I think we're ready for a new cycle again now that that's gone through the system. There's a whole heap of kids that have been brought up by exes that have not rejected, just weren't taught, And so they're not rebelling against anything.
Yeah.
But when you look at the new atheist movement, it's lost steam. They don't know. A lot of kids don't even know who the new atheists are. What did they used to call them? The 5 or 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Atheist apocalypse.
Yeah, something like that. See, that was really big on socials back in the 2000s and 2010s.
Yeah.
But now we're almost 15 years away from that now. So you've got a new generation, and let's invite them to church. Let's sit down and have a meal. And people are too busy. So I think you've got to give people permission to go home after church. Like, you don't say, because we're doing dinner, we're going to try and talk you into staying. It's got to be opt-in. No, you've got to opt into it.
Yeah.
And then we say in church, like, we're having dinner afterwards. If you want to hang around, cool. If not, have a great day. And we're not passive-aggressive about that. We're not like, well, we'd really like you to support the ministry and stay. We don't care if they stay or not.
Yep, that's true.
And then all of a sudden people do. It's funny.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's really, really key. And if people want to go backwards in the feed, you'll find theology, strategy and practice conversations about hospitality, but also about community groups. So what you talked about, that idea of separating discipleship from church. People can go back. We had a really good conversation with Joey, our community groups pastor, Joey, and our ride pastor helped us with those conversations a little bit further back in the feed. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of joy and frivolity as a intentional, I'll say strategy, and so you can push back and let me know what you think, where it kind of fits. But it recently came out of a little bit of a viral moment that we had at Soul Revival. Now, Ethan, this is your space and you were kind of leading this ministry. So how about you tell us about what happened a few Saturday nights ago?
Yeah, we can probably show the video in the edit, and we can have a look at it and talk about it. But the background is that years and years and years ago, a whole bunch of people from Soulies would do what we did regularly, and we haven't done it in a long time. But what we did was a whole bunch of us went to the airport, went to the international terminal, and we just welcomed people into the country. And we just celebrated and cheered, and some lady who was there, she's like an influencer, and she made a little video, and this was the vibe.
Would you want someone to cheer for you like this as you arrive at Sydney Airport? So Azhar and I arrived at Sydney Airport today to pick my father-in-law, and these guys had really turned the vibes up at the airport. They were a group of young people who were literally cheering for everyone as they arrived, and I really enjoyed filming their reactions, their cheers, and everybody else's reactions. And honestly, it was such a good mood changer at the airport, and it was so much fun to watch, and I would love to get this kind of a welcome as I arrived to Sydney Airport. They literally cheered for everyone. People gave them really good reactions as well, and some of them, well, not so much. And especially for the cabin crew and anybody who used to pass by, they used to give them a really loud cheer, which was very, very, very fun to watch. But then I started wondering, who were these people waiting for? Were they even waiting for anybody, or they were at the airport for the vibes? Well, turns out they were waiting for this lucky lady who's probably arrived in Australia on a subsequent visa, and she's here to meet the love of her life and call Sydney her forever home. Whoever this was, well done. Very well done.
I love so much about that. As you watch the video, there's a guy right at the end who jumps out just on this hilarious little dance.
Little Superman pose.
Pose.
It's a football celebration.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
that went viral.
What I loved the first time I watched that was that the creator has assumed that we're there for that last couple.
Yeah.
Based purely on the fact that you guys went home after that because it was 10:30 and you'd promised you get all the teenagers back to church.
Absolutely. Well, we were there for maybe 20 to 30 minutes longer than we had intended.
Right, yeah.
Because we had this conversation with this guy that was there who was like, I'm going to meet this girl that I've been talking to online. She's never been to Australia. We've never met face to face. And he was really cutely sitting there with his rose and just waiting. And then we were cheering. And he was like, can you cheer for her when she gets there?
Yep.
And so we were like, well, we can't go home now. Like we have to wait for her. And so as soon as, when she did rock up, we were like, all right, we got home. Bye, everybody. And we ran out of there. But one of the things she talked about was this thing of I don't know why she's there. Are they there for this person, or are they just here for the vibes? And we kind of were. It was just to bring joy and be celebratory for nothing in particular, out of nothing other than the joy that we already have as a community, and going, well, let's share that with complete strangers in a really fun, silly way. One of the things I said to particularly the younger crew, which turns out I didn't need to say at all, but one of the things I did say was, we're here to celebrate and welcome people. We're not here to scare or be silly or annoy.
Yes.
And they really got that. And really helpfully were like, we're not actually here to just annoy the living daylights out of these poor people that have just been on a long flight. Instead, we're here to celebrate and welcome these people. And most of the people did really get stoked by that. They thought that was really awesome.
Yep. And I think it was at that influencer or someone else who assumed that there was almost like a political edge.
Oh, I haven't seen that, really.
Oh, right. There's just this kind of maybe they're making a point about immigration or these kind of things. And again, it's just so when you say we're there to welcome, there was no political baggage with that either. There's no
Absolutely
statement about refugees or immigration or anything like that that's being said. It was purely, let's just create a positive atmosphere.
Absolutely.
And I just thought it was really curious because it is something that Soul Revival Church and Soul Revival Youth Community has done in various settings around. There's a number of sort of stories from the mythos of Soul Revival Church. Not that long ago, actually when I was leading senior high, so it was a little while ago now actually, we started going to Kick.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things we did when we went to Kick was to take the Jesus coloured flags, so the gospel colours, the 5 colours, and we'd take those flags and we would, do laps around the Kick building and run back and forward and have these flags. And again, just to try to create this
joy
and frivolity. And one that predates my time, but you can fill in the details. And this goes way back into Soul Revival law, is the pool table at Black Stump, which I think is one of these classic stories that just kind of, and this is where I wanted to get to, sets this idea that we would be a community where joy and frivolity and bringing vibes, as Ethan of the next generation would say.
I was just quoting this lady, but yes, you're right. That is what I would say, bringing the vibes.
has been a key part of what we do. So, Stu, two-part question. Just fill us in for like me, who weren't there, the story behind the pool table at Black Stump. But also then, where does this come from for you as the leader of Sorrow Bible Youth Community at the time? Why joy? Why frivolity? Why has that been one of the hallmarks of the way that we've conducted ourselves as community?
So my experience growing up was there was a lot of people who tried really hard to bring joy into our lives at youth group and at church. But in general, a lot of my generation thought the action was outside the church, not inside the church. And so unfortunately, the way incarnationalism was often expressed in the Sutherland Shire was as, from a lot of Christians who actually said this to me, that sometimes they felt like it was an excuse to give them an opportunity to spiritualise going to the pub and going to see live bands, because that's where the action was in the 80s. It was a pub culture. Live music was very, very popular. So there's this sense that, we go to church for the Christian thing and then we go and evangelise to the people who won't come to church and they're in the pub. So the incarnational doctrine was, we're going to the pub because those people won't come to church. And I just saw a lot of people being evangelised into the pub scene, not anyone coming back the other way. So I thought, well, if you do convert someone in a pub and then you then try and introduce them to church, they're going to go, oh, but why do I go to church? So there's not a lot of understanding about the role of community in the life of a born-again Christian. It can become very individualistic, and particularly if the person who converts the other person isn't that stoked on going to church either anyway. So I saw a bit of that when I was growing up. The second thing is, when I started reading youth ministry theory and theology, is this whole idea of incarnation was almost like an excuse to ask people I had to earn the right to be heard before I could tell them about Jesus. I had to assume that cultural differences between the church and the world were so vast that they wouldn't come to church. And I thought, I don't know why, but I thought, well, I don't feel like that was a very joyful way to live as a Christian as a teenager. It was kind of like a bit of a drudge to go to church. Even though I love Jesus, I love going to church, but it was... And I thought, why don't we have joy in the church? What if we bring action into the church? And why don't we have a bit more confidence? Instead of feeling like we have to earn the right to be heard, I think we just preach and we go to school and we tell people about Jesus and teach them and then tell each other. So there was this confidence to bring the action back into the church and have joy and actually have social time as Christians and actually express a Christian culture that was so confident and joyful that it was so uncool that it was cool. Because I read also some politics from the 60s where, really don't have time to go into this properly, but the Black Panther Party for self-defense were the sons and daughters of a generation of African Americans who had been straightening their hair and wearing white clothes in the hope that they would succeed in white society. And yet, because of the particular American context they were in with segregation in the South, they could never actually ever make the grade. So it's the technical term for it is hegemony. And hegemony is that if you be like us and act like us, then you'll be able to have success in our system. It was designed by a guy called Antonio Gramsci, who was trying to get a revolution for the communists in Italy, and he couldn't work out why Russia had their revolution and Italy couldn't be bothered. And what he did was he interviewed a lot of factory workers, and he was surprised to hear that rather than being upset that they were workers and there were these owners of the factories, they believed the hegemony, which he called it, which was if we work hard one day, we'll have a factory too. So they actually didn't want to overthrow the government because they wanted to get rich. But they were never going to get rich because there were things that were obstacles to them, like education, that they were never going to get to help them to get there. So I just made this strange connection, and it's very strange because I'm not a communist, I'm not left-leaning, I'm quite conservative, but I thought the Black Panthers identified the hegemony that said that if you live in white America and you dress like us and straighten your hair, then you'll be successful, and it was keeping a whole generation of African Americans not successful. However, the Black Panthers in the 60s, the children of those people, said, let's be African American, let's get our hair to fro, like let's wear leather jackets and sunglasses and berets and let's be cool. Anyway, they became so cool that the whole movement of counterculture in the 60s rallied around them for a little while in Haight-Ashbury and in Berkeley and in San Francisco. And they were so cool because they weren't trying to be cool. The other influence I had was I watched the grunge movement emerge, and they were successful because they weren't trying to be hair metal. Because everything in the 90s was either alternative music like I liked or the wildly popular mullet that was ubiquitous in the Sutherland Shire because everyone listened to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
But then grunge came along, and they didn't try and pretend to be In Excess or Guns N' Roses. They were Nirvana, and because they were so confident, and that became cool. Now, Kurt Cobain used to wear his pajamas on stage, so there's nothing cool about that. But then all of a sudden, fashion labels around the world started making flannelette shirts and baggy jeans and all that stuff super trendy. So when I'm walking into Kirrawee High School, when I've got my Bible in the early 90s, I'm like, this is the word of God. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is where the action is, being with Jesus. So I just said, basically, I love being a Christian. I'm stoked being a Christian, and it actually brings me joy. And it surprised young people to hear that a church would bring you joy, or being a Christian would bring you joy, or the Bible would bring you joy. And it's partly my personality, but I just had heaps of fun. And I liked being crazy like the Panthers. Now, I didn't want to be like them because they were political and they were left-wing and they carried guns around. It was a bit scary. So I'm not trying to say that. But the hegemony in my generation was, if you're cool like the world and you just come across and you drink like us and you swear like us and you smoke like us and you go to the pubs, then we'll go, oh yeah, you've made it in our scene and we'll listen to you. But Bob Dylan became a Christian and no one listened to him. And if they weren't going to listen to Bob Dylan, how are they ever going to listen to me? He was the coolest artist in the world. And his 2 albums after he became a Christian, Slow Train Coming and another one, I can't remember. What was it? Exodus.
And Saved.
Were bombed. And Saved, there you go. Anyway, they were bombs. Slow Train Running might not be one of them. But anyway, and I just thought, I heard Larry Norman say that because he was saying to people of my generation, don't try and cross over, just be Christian.
Yeah.
We're not a space between the world and the church. We are the church, and we've got to invite people to come and listen to the gospel and see how the church lives it out. So that's kind of my grounding. So then I'm like, and to my surprise, I didn't think I was cool. I don't think I am cool at all, but because I didn't care and I was so confident, everyone's like, that dude's pretty into it. And other dudes started coming and we were all into it together. And there was a bunch of kids in our church that were going to clubs underage and drinking and, you know, walking between pubs and stuff like this, and they weren't joyful. They were actually looking for that freedom that they thought the church was restricting them from. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. And then they looked at Solies, and a few of them came and said to me, man, you guys are cooler than my friends. Like, you guys are going nuts. You're enjoying life. So it was just a natural expression of that philosophy that we're not being incarnational. Now, the big debate is people at the time said we were the best incarnational ministry they'd ever seen because we were going out of the church into the surfing culture, and all these surfers were becoming Christians. So people wrote articles about us being incarnational, and I used to laugh because I'm like, no, we're not trying to be cool like them. They're wanting to become like us. So we're not trying. I love Christian surfers, don't get me wrong, but we're not trying to be Christian surfers. We're just trying to be Christians. And then, so how did that express into the pool table? We were trying to decorate the factory. Oh, sorry, we didn't have a factory at that time. We were trying to decorate a garage, and we needed a lounge. So we went around to a thing called a council cleanup, where people leave all their stuff they want to get rid of on the side of the road, and we were picking it up and taking it back and turning our little thing into a lounge room. And someone found a pool table with the table was ripped and the legs were wonky and there was only one stick and half the balls. And that was our pool table. We played it every week. We loved it. And then someone found another pool cue, and it was the cause of much rejoicing. And then we actually somehow had someone donate a full set of balls to us. And we were sort of like, how's this? Anyway, now Soul Revival wasn't tied to a church because we'd already stopped meeting in the church to go to the garage. We were like ranging around. So we felt like we are the church, not the building we go to. Yeah. So we took the pool table with us where we went. And it just so happens there was a Christian music festival called Black Stump, which we felt was a bit incarnational at the time. And so it was a bit like, yeah, we're Christians, we're cool, have a listen to this band, it's really cool. Oh, this is an a cappella band, sit down and be cool and listen to the a cappella band. Or here's a Christian grunge band, very cool. And we're all like, okay, cool. 80% of our crew came from the world and had just been recently converted. And they were super proud to be Christian. They were really excited about being into Jesus. And they're saying when they go to Black Stump, all these Christians are walking around with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, that they're trying to be cool because they don't think being Christian is cool. Now, I think that was a bit unfair, but that's what they were saying.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, hegemony. We're letting our Christian hair grow out and we're being Christian, observably Christian, instead of trying to be secular Christians or surfer Christians or whatever. We're just Christian. And so we happened to have our pool table and we'd made some flags because we loved the Jesus bead colours and we wanted everyone to see them. We had them around our wrist, but we also wanted to see them from a distance. So we go to Black Stump, and it wasn't our intention to take over or be arrogant or anything, but we set up the pool table in the middle of their little village that was there, and we were playing pool there, right? And then we just left it there so people could play pool. And they'd come and meet us and we'd talk to them and stuff. Anyway, one night it was raining and the rain's raining and there we all are and we're playing pool. And this guy comes and goes, "What are you doing?" And I remember this one guy who's been a Christian for a week, he goes, "We're playing pool." He goes, "Well, why are you doing it here?" He goes, "Because that's where we are." "Right, so you carry a pool table around?" He goes, "Yeah, sometimes." "So what are you trying to achieve? What's the strategy? And the kid's just like, "We're just playing pool, man." So there's something going on there. I'm watching that interaction and I'm like, here's this person who I really respected as a youth minister who was trying to work out what was going on. He was a generation older than me. He's one of the main stage speakers. He's like, he's just talking to this kid. Well, what is it? And I don't have a category for this because this isn't cool. You don't look cool playing pool in the rain. But we weren't doing that silly Christian, let's be silly either. Like sometimes Christian teenagers could be silly. I don't know how to explain that better, but I don't want to be too critical, but sometimes Christian teenagers can appear to me to be inexperienced in expressing their Christianity socially, so they're a little bit awkward when it comes to public shows of Christian social interactions. Our kids had come out of the world into the church and they were quite comfortable in their social interactions, and we weren't trying to be dumb and funny. We were just excited and having fun. It kind of worked in the 90s because the grunge era was all about being hardcore and just really enjoying life. Funny because everyone was depressed and listening to sad music. But other than that, anyway, it came to the main stage and then someone said, "Let's do a pool table run." It wasn't me. And all the young surfers with their long hair, which by the way, no one else in the whole crowd had long hair. In 1991, except our crew, because they'd all come out of the world and Nirvana and all that stuff had happened in the culture, hadn't quite got into the Christian culture yet. So these boys get up and run with the flags around a crowd of about 1,000 people with the pool table. There's 4 of them with the pool table and all these young 16-year-old surfers, grunge metalheads who've been smoking marijuana and sleeping with their girlfriends and now they've become Christians. And some of them actually still hadn't given up cigarettes. So one of the dudes had a fag hanging out of his mouth as he's running with the pool table. And people looking at this going, I don't have a category for this. But it was a joyful Christian church that was running around saying, let's bless these people and have fun. So they ran around and people started to boo because they thought we were showing off and taking over, because these boys jumped up right in the middle of Fuzz Kiddo's talk. And Fuzz Kiddo from the stage says, "Stop booing. This is wonderful. These boys are so excited to be Christian that they want to run around with a pool table." And you might think that's crazy, but they are enjoying sharing their joy with us. And a couple of crew got up from the crowd and went running with the pool table. One of the boys fell over, broke his arm, and got back up and kept running. And then he came back and he had his arm. So that's where it started.
Yeah.
And I think it came from a sense that we're going to be Christians publicly, and we're also going to try and see if we can teach the young Christians who grow up in the church how to be Christian adults and enjoy themselves in the church, not think that the action has to be in the world.
Yeah. I think one of the cool things that is not like we don't have the same vibe as that, because now is very different to the 90s. And as you were saying, a lot of that was culturally in the 90s but just this weekend we hosted a gig at Kirrawee on Saturday night, and I was talking to the band afterwards, And one of the guys in the band said that was amazing fun. And one of the reasons he thought it was so fun was because usually his job is to kind of get the crowd going. But from song one, we were losing our minds and singing and jumping and crashing into each other. And it was really like a brilliant expression of silliness that this guy was like, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Because there wasn't even a moment. What did he say? He said, usually I have to get the crowd going, but instead I spent the whole gig trying to keep up.
That's nice.
And is this the bass player?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because he was definitely the vibes man.
Absolutely.
I loved it.
Yeah. He had heaps of fun. And his whole thing was, I'm going to bring this joy into this space because that's usually my job.
Yeah.
But you guys just already had this fun, almost chaotic energy that he was enjoying keeping up with.
I think you've reinvented what we were doing into something that's real for you, and you've not just copied what we did, but I can see it's just as fun and joyful as it was in the 90s.
Seems fun.
Like we were at Black Stump and we went to an a cappella band and we moshed. No one had moshed in Sydney yet. We were told by Black Stump, you're the first Christians we've ever seen moshing, and people didn't know what to do with it. And we weren't moshing as an arrogant, aggressive thing. It's like a big group hug. So we were crowd surfing a cappella singers who were in their 40s and they didn't know what to do. Yeah. And then we went from that to
but also,
main stage, and then everyone's like, oh, Solis is here, cool, because let's have fun, that's kind of really fun.
I was going to say, not making fun of the a cappella group as well. So
No.
there's nothing sarcastic about it.
No, not at all.
There's nothing passive aggressive about it. We're not saying, wow, how dorky is a cappella? Let's mosh to make fun of it. Like all of this was the expression of joy, and I think that is just a really lovely thing, and ties back into what we were saying about friendship being really key. Like, whether it be the hospitality that we do, the meals that we do, whether it's the frivolity and the fun and the laughter, comes out of the idea. Theologically, we've talked about, we're friends with Jesus because of the atonement. Because of the atonement, we're friends with Jesus. He makes us friends with each other, builds us into the community that he calls the church, and then we are able to express that in really joyful ways. And just to tie it back to another theme that we talk about a lot is the idea of third place sociology. And one of Oldenburg's 8 categories for third place sociology is that laughter is frequent. And so one of the things, again, your phrase, Stu, but you talk about sober joy all the time. That being, there are sober times in the life of a community. There is an appropriate repentance of sin. There is an appropriate mournfulness when sad things happen. There's mourning with those who mourn. And yet there is also joy. And I think that is often what's missing sometimes in our expressions of Christianity.
I think so.
It's just the joyfulness, the frivolity of being really excited about silly things.
Yeah. Or chicken sandwiches. Because that brought me joy. I walked out of that church and I saw those. And I'm like, wow, look at that chicken's little triangle sitting there.
Yeah.
Sweating in the sun, probably filling with bacteria as I'm looking at it, but I'm going to have 3 of those.
I think it's funny, I really love all of our reasons for doing food. They're all really great, but it's just as, it's almost just as legit to be like the guy sitting and playing pool in the rain when someone says, why do you guys do food? And just be like, it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to have a reason. That's right. It's an expression of what we want to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's okay. And I think that's wonderful. It's this expression of, actually, we really like hanging out together. That's why we do it.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. And there's a whole bunch of, again, talking to this bass player, one of the things that we did on the night was, instead of moshing, we just ran around in a circle. And he'd never seen anyone do that. And
that was from the 90s.
I was going to say, he's not a 90s kid.
Absolutely. And
Skank circle.
And one of the things I said was that, it does this, this, and this for the vibe. I just outlined that
how it's good.
One of the reasons it's really good is because it brings everyone from out of the circle into the circle. Because if you don't want to mosh and jump up and down, you can grab randoms and make them run in a circle. That's so fine. And what he was very shocked by was that we'd actually thought about it. Like Like, so at one end, it is just silly and fun and crazy and wild. But on the other hand, it's really thought through. And I think these conversations about food or about joy or about like preaching in weird places. Like, I think these all have really great reasoning behind everything we do.
Yes.
But we also just do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
Like that's okay too.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like trying to explain why a joke works.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing
Absolutely.
quite as boring as trying to explain why comedy works.
Yeah.
But there is deep reason why
Absolutely.
comedy works. And the classic, Monty Python kind of thing. Why does, like, Monty Python is chaotic and silly and frivolous. And yet, I mean, they're also all Oxford and Cambridge grads who knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so you can, pull it apart and look for all the reasons underneath of why Monty Python works, historically, sociologically, from a comedic point of view. And also you can just watch it and enjoy it. And so I think that's kind of part of and it's part of what this podcast is about, is thinking through what's the theology, the strategy and the practice. And as you were speaking, Ethan, I was thinking, I started this little bit thinking, is joy a strategy or is it something else? And I think you're right. It flows through, it comes from the theology. There is a theology of joyfulness because how great is it that Jesus has saved us?
Absolutely.
Like, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
There's a strategic piece that puts it into the friendship third place category, not in a incarnational, what's the coolest thing we could do? What's the most worldly fun we could have? Let's try and do that with the Christian gloss. It's no, it comes out of our expression of who we are. And there is just the practice of let's just run in a circle while someone plays Glorious Day, and just have super fun with it because it is fun. So it ties all that together.
Can I ask just one more thing before you sign off? One funny thing about Anglican churches is often my Pentecostal friends come and say, I don't see many people raising their hands. I see some people, but there's not many people who feel free enough to raise their hands, and they're worried that maybe people feel repressed and they don't feel like they can. Now, my answer to that is if you want to raise your hands in church, you can. We're not going to teach it, but you can do whatever you want. But I always have a giggle to myself because if they could see how we worship to a live band, it's jumping up and down and running around in a circle and crowd surfing people, which they would feel is going too far sometimes, I reckon.
Yes.
So it's interesting that people underestimate us sometimes with the amount of joy that we have in our church services, but we have a proper sobriety in those formal services that we then let loose in worshipping God as we dance and sing and run around. And the funny thing is you guys love songs that sing about Jesus. And so the old thing in the 90s was, if people clap, they're not listening to the words. Yeah. Well, actually, they know them off by heart because they're so exciting that they're picking some person and choosing to embrace them in a big group hug as they run around.
Yeah, and it was really fun singing worship songs, but like in a mosh, and dancing around, it was really great. And then collapsing outside because I'm an old man and I can't
It was also like
keep it up for that long
an
anymore.
Unholy amount of heat. Like it was just.
It was a very warm night.
There's no windows in that building.
There was a lot of sweat.
It's awful. It was very fun though.
Thank you so much, boys.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for those who are listening along, like and subscribe. Thank you for making it to the end of the episode. I hope it's been helpful thinking about these things. If you would like to reach out to us, you can reach out at joel@shockabsorber.com to comment under the video as well on YouTube. It would be great. But we'll finish as we always do with a one way.
One way.
One way.